The night was quiet and still when the first strange light appeared in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. It was faint at first, like a single glowing ember in a sea of black, but within seconds it grew brighter and larger until it was impossible to ignore. People stepped out of their homes, holding phones and cameras pointing upward, their voices filled with confusion and fear across the coast. Drivers pulled over on highways, watching in silence as the light multiplied and spread into dozens of burning streaks cutting across the heavens. News anchors spoke quickly, their voices trembling, calling it a meteor shower. Yet something in their tone betrayed doubt, because these lights were not falling like meteors. They were moving in perfect formation, as if they were alive, as if they had purpose in the control rooms of satellites and observatories. Alarms began to sound, screens filled with flashing warnings, tracking systems showing objects moving faster than any aircraft on record. Then one by one, those screens went black. Entire networks collapsed, communication lines fizzled out. The first major satellite went offline without a sound, and then another and another, until the night sky above Earth was littered with silent glowing shapes drifting ever closer. The people below watched in frozen terror as the shapes slowed to a crawl and then stopped, hanging above cities, oceans, and mountains, their edges shimmering with a strange blue light. And then, without warning, the first beam of energy tore through the sky. It was so bright it blinded those who looked directly at it. The beam struck a space station orbiting Earth, and in an instant the station was gone, torn apart into countless fragments that burned as they fell. Through the atmosphere, the blast was so powerful that even on the ground, people felt a low, deep vibration in their bones for a moment. There was only silence, and then the screams began in New York, in Tokyo, and Sydney. The alien fleet moved as one, their beams targeting more satellite space stations and defense platforms, cutting away Earth's eyes and ears in space. Within minutes, the planet was blind. The emergency broadcast system stuttered and crackled. The face of the world's most powerful leader appeared on millions of screens, his voice steady but his eyes dark with the weight of what was unfolding. "We are under attack from forces unknown. We will fight, we will survive." But before he could finish, the feed was hijacked, replaced by a deep metallic voice, speaking in perfect human language. "Your time is over. Humans, surrender, and you may live. Fight, and you will burn on the streets below." Panic turned to chaos. People ran through intersections, abandoning cars. Some dropped, too, their knees praying. Others shouted at the sky, shaking fists, as if their rage alone could fight back in a small apartment far from the city center. A young scientist named Mara stood frozen. Her eyes locked on the sky. She had seen something the news had not reported. Something in the aliens' movement was wrong. It was too clean, too perfect. It was the kind of precision that hinted at a pattern, one that could be read, one that could be broken in a nearby military base. Soldiers scrambled to load weapons, though none knew if their bullets would matter. Tanks rolled into position and jets took to the air, their engines screaming into the dark clouds. But before they could fire, the largest alien ship in the fleet shifted its position. Drawing closer than any of the others, its surface seemed alive with blue fire, its shadow swallowing entire neighborhoods as it passed. The roar of its engines was like 1,000 storms tearing at the air, and then it stopped, hanging in the sky. Just above the edge of the city, a strange vibration pulsed from its core, rattling windows, making glass tremble on shelves. Dogs barked wildly. People covered their ears as the sound deepened into a rumble. The front of the ship began to split open, slowly, methodically, revealing an enormous dark space within. No one could see what was inside, but they could feel something moving, something massive and alive. The air grew colder and heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Every camera, every eye on Earth turned upward, as a single shard of light began to grow in the ship's opening, glowing brighter and brighter, until it seemed the sky itself would tear apart. And then, without warning, the light surged forward in a single, violent burst straight toward the ground. The shard of light tore through the clouds, leaving a burning trail behind it as it descended faster than anything human eyes had ever seen. People screamed and scattered in every direction, some falling too. The ground in panic, others frozen in place, unable to move as the blazing object split into several smaller pieces, each one curving toward a different part of the city, with unnatural precision. A heartbeat later, the first impact hit the ground, with a thunderous crack, sending shockwaves that shattered windows and threw cars onto their sides. The air filled with fire and dust as the other objects followed, slamming into streets, parks, rooftops, leaving behind craters from which strange metal shapes began to rise. They were machines taller than any building, their bodies covered in jagged armor that pulsed with a blue glow, their movements sharp and deliberate like predators on the hunt. They emitted a high-pitched tone that pierced the air and made people clutch their heads in pain. Within seconds, they began firing beams of white light cutting through concrete, steel, and flesh with equal ease. The military jets that had taken off earlier dove into attack, unleashing missiles that exploded against the machine's armor in bursts of flame. But when the smoke cleared, the machines stood unharmed, their glowing cores pulsing brighter. As if feeding on the energy, Mara stood on her balcony, watching the chaos, her mind racing her. Neighbors screamed for help, some dragging the wounded away from the street below. She wasn't a soldier, she wasn't a fighter, but she knew this wasn't random. The machine's landings, the exact positions, the timing, everything was deliberate. She dashed inside, grabbed her laptop, and began pulling whatever satellite data remained before the system collapsed completely. She compared the points of impact, overlaying them on a digital map, her fingers trembling as the picture became clear. The pattern was geometric precise, a shape designed for something larger, something terrible at the same time. In the city's Defense Command Center, officers shouted orders, trying to organize ground forces. Tanks rolled down avenues, firing shell after shell at the alien machines. Explosions shook the streets, but nothing slowed them. The creatures returned fire, tearing through armor like paper smoke, rose from every corner of the city, turning the midday sky into a dim shadow of itself, and still more objects fell from the alien ship, each one bringing another towering machine into the battle in a hidden bunker beneath the city. The president received the first fragmented message from Mara. It wasn't long or complicated, it was just a string of coordinates followed by 6 words. I know how to hurt them. The officers around him stared at the screen, unsure if it was real, but there was no time to question, as new alarms blared indicating even more alien forces entering Earth's atmosphere above the city. The largest alien ship shifted again, its movements slow, almost graceful, as if savoring the destruction. Below, lights along its hull began to pulse in a new rhythm, each flash sending a ripple through the smaller ships, and machines making them move faster, strike harder. The ground shook as one of the machines slammed a massive claw into a skyscraper, ripping it in half in seconds. Debris rained down, burying streets and vehicles in twisted metal. Mara's hands flew over her keyboard, running calculations on the energy readings she had stolen from the satellites. She could see it. Now the weakness was there, hidden in the alien design, but exploiting it would require hitting their power source directly, not from outside, but from within. She began drafting a second message, one that included her theory and a crude plan for how to reach the source, when she heard a low, roaring sound from above her building. She rushed to the window and saw a group of alien drones, black and sleek, diving through the air, scanning rooftops with thin beams of red light. They were searching for something or someone. Her pulse quickened as the beam passed over her window, pausing for half a second before moving on. She ducked back inside, breathing hard. She knew she had only minutes before they found her on the streets. The last remaining tank in the sector fired at point-blank range into the chest of one of the towering machines. The shot penetrated its armor. For the first time, sparks and dark liquid sprayed into the air. The machine staggered, its glowing core flickering before stabilizing. The soldiers whooped in triumph for a brief moment before another beam from the ship above turned them to ash. The scene played out on live broadcasts across the globe, every network, every remaining feed showing humanity's desperate fight. But the alien fleet was adapting, growing faster, stronger, and more precise. As the battle continued, Mara finally hit send on her second message. Her location, her theory, and one urgent warning: we have hours at most before they change formation, and when they do, it will be over. She closed her laptop, grabbed a small backpack, and bolted for the stairwell as the first of the alien drones descended toward her building. The sky outside darkened again, as if a second night had fallen, the largest ship overhead, casting its shadow across the entire city, and from its center, a new structure began to emerge, twisting and unfolding like the opening of some monstrous flower, something far bigger than the machines already on the ground, something that made even the alien warships seem small. The monstrous shape rising from the alien flagship seemed endless, its black metal body coiling outward like the skeleton of some ancient beast, each section bristling with weapons that hummed with low, menacing energy. The glow from its surface lit the clouds in a cold, unnatural blue, and every time a new segment locked into place, a deep vibration rolled across the city, shaking glass and rattling bones. Below, fighter jets circled it like insects against a storm, their missiles exploding harmlessly against its armor. The thing was larger than any human craft ever built, so massive it cast a shadow that swallowed entire neighborhoods. People on the streets stopped running just to stare up at it, their fear turning into a stunned silence. As they tried to understand what they were seeing in an underground command room far from the front lines, the military's top officers watched the live feed, their voices tense as they realized the truth. This was not just another warship. It was the command vessel, the heart of the alien invasion. If it fell, the fleet might break apart, but its size and defenses made that goal almost impossible. Mara's message had reached them, and the room buzzed with cautious hope. Her theory about the alien weakness offered the first real chance they had seen since the attack began. The element she had identified was rare on Earth, but there was enough stored in a few classified research labs to create experimental weapons, still untested, still unstable. The president gave the order anyway. Build them now and get them in the air in the chaos of the burning city. Mara had made her way to a hidden transport tunnel where emergency vehicles waited her backpack, heavy with stolen data she had. Taken from a private lab, she knew the risk of moving through the streets with alien drones sweeping overhead, but she also knew she was running out of time. She could hear their engines, now sharp whining sounds that echoed through the tunnels like hunting animals searching for prey above ground. The colossal alien vessel began to move not toward the city, but away from it, toward open ocean. Its movements slow and deliberate, as if preparing for something larger in orbit beyond Earth's reach. The smaller alien ships shifted their positions, forming a tight defensive ring around the massive flagship, a living shield that bristled with cannons and energy weapons, each one capable of wiping out an entire squadron of human fighters in seconds. On the edge of Earth's atmosphere, a group of rogue pilots who had refused to wait for official orders prepared for their own desperate mission. Their leader, a scarred veteran named Keon, had no illusions about survival, but he believed in striking. First, and striking hard, they armed their ships with whatever weapons they could find, loading old nuclear warheads next to untested energy cannons, even strapping explosives to the hulls of their fighters for a final run as they broke formation, and dove toward the alien ring. Their comms lit up with shouts of warning from the military, but they didn't turn back. Keon's voice was steady. We hit them now, or we die later. The first wave of rogue fighters slammed into the alien shield, unleashing. A storm of fire and light explosions flared against the alien defenses. Some ships vanished instantly under return fire, but one pilot broke through, weaving between enemy blasts until he was within range of the flagship's surface. He fired a single missile aimed at a section of the hull Mara's calculations had flagged. As vulnerable, the impact was small compared to the scale of the ship. But in that instant, something incredible happened. The alien shields flickered and failed in one narrow section, exposing bare black metal to open space. Cheers erupted across the human comm channels. The impossible had happened, but the celebration lasted only seconds. The flagship turned its cannons toward Earth and unleashed a single shot that streaked through the atmosphere and struck the heart of a city far from the battle. In an instant, millions of lives were gone. The shockwave lit the night sky like a second sunrise, and the noise rolled across the world like the roar of a dying giant. Panic gripped every human stronghold. If the aliens could destroy cities so easily, how long could any of them last? Mara's transport burst out of the tunnel into an old airfield where a cargo plane waited, its engines already running. Soldiers waved her forward, shouting over the noise as she climbed aboard. Clutching her backpack inside were the designs and coordinates for the aliens' weakness. But as the plane's wheels left the ground, she looked out toward the ocean and saw the flagship beginning to change its form again, sections of its armor sliding apart, revealing what looked like a long, glowing spine of light that pulsed in rhythm with the movements of the smaller ships. Something about it filled her with dread. She didn't know why, but she was certain this was only the beginning, and whatever the aliens were preparing would make everything so far look like a warning. The city that had been reduced to a smoking ruin still burned as survivors stumbled through the rubble, their faces covered in ash, their voices hoarse from smoke. Yet the sight of the alien flagship drifting toward the ocean did not bring relief. It brought rage. News of the destroyed city had spread in minutes across every surviving broadcast network. And something changed in the way humanity looked at the invaders. Fear was still there, but it was no longer alone. It was joined by fury, a deep, relentless fury that crossed borders and languages and histories. In the war rooms of nations that had once been enemies, maps were cleared of political lines, replaced with red markers showing alien movements. Weapons factories that had been silent for decades roared back to life. Ships that had never been meant for war were refitted with guns, missiles, and improvised explosives. From the frozen bases of the north to the deserts of the south, soldiers, engineers, scientists, and civilians worked side by side. Without hesitation, Mara's plane landed in a hidden military installation carved deep into the mountains, and the moment she stepped out, she was surrounded by officers who took her backpack and rushed it to the research wing. The prototype weapon they were building looked nothing like the sleek alien technology. It was rough, heavy, dangerous to even touch. But it carried the rare element she had identified, and in theory it could overload the alien power cores from the inside. The problem was delivery. Their shields were too strong to allow any external hit to work. Someone would have to bring the weapon inside the flagship itself, which meant a mission so close to suicide that only the desperate would volunteer. The president called for the best special operations team still alive. They were called the Black Lance, an elite unit, trained for missions behind enemy lines. They arrived in silence, their armor scarred from earlier battles, their eyes calm and cold, each of them knowing the odds and each one ready anyway. The plan was simple on paper, a stealth drop from high altitude, straight into the flagship's exposed section plant, the weapon in the central core, and get out before detonation. In reality, it meant flying through a swarm of alien fighters, breaching the hull of a ship that could crush them with a single shot, and moving through corridors likely crawling with enemy soldiers. Mara insisted on going with them. She was the only one who understood the alien design well enough to guide them, but the commander of the Black Lance refused, at first saying this was no place for scientists. Yet when she explained that without her, the weapon might not even activate, he gave a slow, reluctant nod. Outside the base, the world prepared for its largest coordinated counterattack in history. Fleets of warships rose from harbors, submarines surfaced in the open sea, fighter jets took to the skies in waves so large they blotted out the sun. The aliens responded by shifting their smaller ships into tight attack groups, creating kill zones in the air and on the water. Every second, human lives were being traded for a few meters of progress. As the Black Lance geared up the lights in the base, flickered a deep voice crackled over the intercom, a voice none of them had ever heard before. It spoke in perfect English, slow and heavy like stone sliding over stone. Enter. We have been waiting for you. Every sound in the room stopped. Soldiers glanced at each other in disbelief. The voice had come not from human communications, but from the alien channel. The flagship was broadcasting directly to them. The commander of the Black Lance clenched his jaw and looked at Mara. This changes nothing. We finished the mission. Mara said nothing, but inside her mind raced. If the aliens knew about the weapon, why would they invite them in? Was it arrogance, a trap, or something else entirely? Moments later, the Black Lance boarded a stealth dropship, its engines whisper quiet as it climbed into the sky, the city lights below shrinking to tiny sparks in a sea of black. Clouds ahead, the massive alien flagship waited, its shadow stretching across the water like the outline of a leviathan. The dropship's pilot steadied her hands as alien scanners swept over them. Strangely, the flagship did not fire. Instead, a section of its hull slowly opened, revealing a hangar bathed in blue light, large enough to hold 100 human ships. The dropship slid inside the opening, sealed behind them, locking out the view of the Earth for a moment. There was only the hum of alien machinery and the cold metallic smell of the air. Then shapes began to emerge from the blue haze, figures tall and armored, moving with inhuman grace, their weapons lowered, but their black glassy faces unreadable. The Black Lance readied their rifles. Mara's heart pounded. The alien voice returned louder now, echoing through the hangar. Welcome, humans, come see the heart of your destruction. The hangar stretched endlessly beneath a ceiling of shifting metal panels that seemed to breathe. Faint streams of blue mist curled along the floor and clung to the legs of the humans as they moved forward, their boots echoing softly in the vast emptiness. The alien figures stood in two silent lines on either side of the path, their armor gleaming with an oily sheen, their faces hidden behind dark glass. None of them raised a weapon. None of them spoke. It was as if they were waiting for something, or someone. Mara kept her eyes moving, scanning every surface, every pattern on the walls, every pulse of light. She knew the alien design well enough now to understand that nothing here was random. Everything had a purpose. The Black Lance stayed close, their weapons trained on the nearest figures. The commander's voice low and sharp in Mara's earpiece. If they move, you drop. She gave a short nod, though her mind was not on the aliens standing before them, but on the weapon in her pack and the narrow window of time. They had to plant it without being discovered. The silence broke as a tall figure stepped forward from the far end of the hangar, its movement slow, deliberate. It was larger than the others, its armor etched with intricate markings that shimmered faintly in the light. When it spoke, the voice was the same one that had called them aboard. You fight as if you are more than you are, but you are small, you are fragile, you have no place here. The commander did not answer. Instead, he motioned for the team to keep moving, but the alien lifted a long, three-fingered hand, and the floor between them shifted and opened, revealing a wide stairway that led down into darkness. Follow if you wish to see the truth. The commander hesitated only for a breath before signaling the team forward. They descended into the dark, the air growing colder. The walls around them lined with strange tubes filled with a thick, glowing fluid. Shapes floated inside the tubes, shifting slowly. In the liquid, some looked human. Others did not. Mara felt her skin prickle as she passed one tube that held a shape almost exactly like her face. The eyes opened for a fraction of a second before the light inside flickered out and the tube went dark. The stairway ended in a massive chamber lit by a single pillar of white light at its center, machinery wrapped around it like a skeletal cage, wires and pipes humming with power. Mara recognized it instantly, the core. This was what powered the ship and perhaps the entire fleet. If they could plant the weapon here and detonate it, the chain reaction would cripple every alien vessel in orbit. But before they could move closer, another figure stepped from the shadows, its armor darker, heavier. Then the rest, a deep scar running across the faceplate. It was not alone. Dozens of armed aliens moved in behind it, forming a wall between the humans and the core. The first tall figure raised its hand again, and the armed soldiers froze these humans. May yet serve a greater purpose. It said to its soldiers in a language Mara could not understand, but she caught the way its voice shifted the faint edge of division in its tone. It stepped closer to her, leaning down until the smooth glass of its mask was inches from her face. Then in perfect English, it whispered, "There is one among us who would see your world burned, but not all of us agree." It moved back before she could reply. The commander gave her a sharp look, as if demanding to know what was said, but there was no time to explain. The alien turned and motioned them to follow once more, leading them through a narrow corridor that twisted deeper into the ship. The walls here were damaged, scorched with black burns, the air sharp, with the scent of something burnt and metallic. As they passed an open doorway, Mara caught sight of alien bodies lying on the floor, their armor cracked, weapons scattered. It looked like a battle had taken place here recently. Whatever was happening. Inside this ship, it wasn't unity. They reached a small maintenance room overlooking the core through a pane of thick glass. The alien turned to them. "You have one chance. The leader will arrive soon. When he does, nothing can save you. Plant your weapon now and leave while you still can." The commander wasted no time signaling two of his soldiers to move forward. They began setting the weapon into a recess in the wall where its charge could feed directly into the core. Mara worked beside them, her hands steady. Despite the pounding of her heart, every wire, every connection had to be perfect. The timer set the failsafe armed, but as she turned to leave the room, a deep rumble shook the floor dust falling from the ceiling, the blue lights. Along the walls turned crimson, and the air filled with a low mechanical roar. The alien who had helped them looked toward the chamber door, its voice low with dread. "He is here through the open doorway." Mara saw the silhouette fill the far end of the corridor, towering broad and wrapped in armor that shimmered like liquid fire. The true leader of the invasion had arrived. The towering figure stepped into the chamber with a weight that seemed to press against the air itself, each footfall sending a faint vibration through the floor. The crimson lights reflected off its armor, turning it into a living blaze, its face hidden behind a mask that seemed to flow and shift like molten metal. The alien soldiers who had stood so still before now dropped to one knee in perfect unison, their heads bowed. The one who had helped the humans took a single step back, its posture tense, as if expecting death. Without warning, the leader's voice filled the room, a sound that was neither shout nor whisper, but carried through every corner like a wave of thunder. "You are insects, yet you resist, you spill our blood. You are nothing, and still you dare to set foot here." The Black Lance raised their weapons, but the commander held up a hand. The alien leader moved forward until it stood before the glass wall that looked down into the core, its head turning slightly, as if it could see the weapon planted deep within its glow. Pulsing faintly, its laugh was low and cold. "You think this will harm me?" Mara felt her throat tighten but forced herself to speak. Her voice steady. "This ship is your power without it." You fall. The leader's head tilted slightly as though studying her before it replied. "Power is never in ships or weapons. It is in will, and your will is broken." It lifted one long arm, and with a flick of its hand, the glass wall shattered in silence, as if the sound itself had been stolen. The shards floated in the air, suspended in some unseen field, then drifted aside, clearing the path. To the core, the alien soldiers stepped forward, Weapons raised and the chamber erupted in chaos. Gunfire lit the air. The Black Lance moved as one firing in short, deadly bursts, dropping alien after alien, but more poured in from every corridor. The commander barked orders covering Mara as she ran toward the core, her boots slipping on the smooth metal floor. She reached the weapon and saw the timer had been halted frozen. At 2 minutes, the leader had stopped it with nothing but a thought. She slammed her hand on the manual override, but the mechanism stayed cold, locked. Mara turned to see the leader watching her unmoving, as if daring her to try again. Then the alien who had helped them appeared behind the leader, its blade flashing. In the crimson light, it struck deep into the leader's armor, sending a spray of black fluid into the air. The leader staggered but did not fall. Instead, it turned with inhuman speed, grabbing the traitor by the throat and lifting it off the ground. In one fluid motion, crushing its armor with a sound like snapping bone. Mara knew there was no time. The leader's attention was split, and she lunged forward, pulling the failsafe from her belt. This would bypass the timer, but it meant there would be no delay once triggered. She locked it into place, and the weapon began to hum, the vibration building through the floor. The leader's head snapped toward her, its eyes behind the molten mask flaring with light. It moved like a storm crossing, the distance between them in seconds. But the commander stepped into its path, firing point blank into its chest. The shots burned into its armor but did not pierce it. Still, it slowed enough for Mara to press the final trigger. A deep pulse rolled out from the weapon. The lights in the chamber flickered, the hum rising into a piercing whine. The leader roared a sound so deep it rattled her teeth, and in that instant Mara knew she would not make it out. She turned to the commander, her voice breaking. "Get them out!" Now he hesitated for only a heartbeat before shouting the order. The Black Lance began to retreat, dragging the wounded through the side corridor as the weapon's light grew so bright it turned the air white. The leader lunged for her, but she stood her ground, her hand gripping the weapon's housing as if holding it in place. The last thing she saw was the molten mask inches from her face before everything vanished in the explosion. The flagship tore apart in a single, brilliant flash visible from the surface of Earth. The shockwave rolled across the sky, lighting the oceans and shattering the alien formation in orbit. Their smaller ships lost cohesion, scattering in every direction, human forces everywhere seized. The moment pressing their attack and driving the enemy back for the first time since the invasion began on the ground in cities still burning, survivors looked up at the strange new sunrise, the wreckage of the flagship burning through the atmosphere, leaving streaks of light that would be remembered for generations. The news carried only one message across every channel: they came for our end. We showed them our beginning.